So welcome everyone, good morning, and welcome to a new event in the Professional Development Series. Today we'll be talking to Jenny Evans, Chris Carnossus, and Katia Friedrich about getting their perspective on interviewing for academic jobs. And I will start by asking the panelists to briefly introduce themselves and tell us a bit about their experience interviewing candidates for academic positions. And then I'll open up to questions from the audience, or I have a few questions prepared that I can ask the panelists. So any of the panelists want to start by introducing themselves? Jenny?
I'll start. So hi, everybody. I'm Jenny Evans. I'm a faculty member and professor of meteorology and atmospheric science at Penn State. And I run Penn State's Institute for Computational and Data Sciences. So I've been at Penn State since I left my PhD, came here in the end of 1992. So over that time, I've had tens of grad students. I'm not sure how many, although I can name them if you ask me. And one of the things in terms of grad student, postdoc, and faculty candidates, I'll get back to a bit about me maybe later, is what's different about them, right? And, you know, I care about their research and their skills and their professional qualifications and everything. But I took on one grad student, he had all of that, but he'd also trekked across America and had written a blog and had done these really cool things, right? Another woman, as an undergrad, had taken herself on 2 international study abroads. Someone else had started a community activity. Yeah, I can't think about it, but those are some things. Yeah. Then I've gone all over the place already. Then other things I look at are how much the person knows what they're trying to do. You don't have to know how you're going to get there, right? But what am I trying to do? What am I trying to achieve? And why? The worst faculty interview I ever saw was when someone was asked why they'd chosen that research area. And they said, because my advisor had funding. Yeah, anyway. So, I mean, I'm happy to say a lot more. Let me say a little bit more about myself, which I probably should have finished. So I did my undergrad and PhD in applied math, came to Penn State in meteorology, never having taken a meteorology class. So something you learn when you get on a faculty is you have to be able to teach what you needed to teach. So you have to figure it out and find the people and resources to help you figure it out. In terms of, you know, growing as a scientist and a researcher, one of the things I did a lot was to get involved at the national level, to accept any committee opportunity for, you know, planning of activities and so on. So the US Weather Research Program was one. There was a big international field program and things like that. And then also committees at the AMS, and sort of get, you know, as you go up, you get more involved in bigger and bigger opportunities there, and you meet amazing people who then think about you for other opportunities. So I guess that's something that helped me a lot. Also within the university, you don't take the, you know, redecorating the hallway committee, but if there's anything that's forward-looking or looking across colleges or something like that, I always took those opportunities. And opportunities to talk to people who visited, especially people who were at the end of their career or at the very beginning of their career, right? So those were some things. I ended up running the Institute for Computational and Data Sciences. All right, didn't end up, I don't expect this to be the last thing I do. But people always say, well, what's a meteorologist doing that? Well, the first programmable computer, one of the first, or maybe the first application, was weather forecasting. Jules Charney and John von Neumann got together and said, hey, this is an incredible resource, right? So that's the context. What I'm doing there, and something I think is important now in research more generally, is ICDS, the Institute for Computational and Data Sciences, is an interdisciplinary institute that stretches across the whole university. And then we as an institute are making connections to universities all around the country and to also to Australian University. We are tasked with growing the intellectual community around computational and data sciences, which of course includes meteorology and climate science and all of those, but it also includes human development and family studies, nuclear engineering, political science, you name it, right? Any kind of
Sounds
science.
like a lot.
Yeah, anything. We've just got a new hire coming in education. We have 2 hires in law around data science and policy and legal regulation and so on. And one of the important things, and we run the high performance computing system too. One of the important things there, and I think something that is increasingly important and something that I tried to promote when I was the president of the AMS a couple of years back, is this idea of, you know, we're not just trying to study one small piece of the world, we're trying to study how the world works. So you pick, part of your research is to put it in context of something bigger, and that often requires working across multiple disciplines, sometimes many disciplines, and really taking on a kind of a societal or scientific grand challenge. So it doesn't have to mean you could be working across disciplines, so working across computer science and statistics and meteorology, or you could be working with people in communications and geography or whatever, right? But this big picture, interdisciplinary, I think is something that's, you know, the funding is growing there. But I also think it's just a fantastic way to think about your own research and to really feel like you're making a big impact. And so that's something that I promote, I really value, and I think it's got a lot of promise, both in terms of you and your context for your research and your excitement of what you're doing, and also just that I feel like it's the way the world is going and funding is going and so on. So those are my big picture points.
Thank you. Let's hear from Chris.
Hi there. It looks like Katja had an internet problem, so hopefully she'll be back in a minute.
Yeah,
my name is
back.
Here she is.
Oh, great. Hi, Katja. My name is Chris Karnauskas, and I'm an associate professor in the Department of Atmospheric and Oceanic Sciences here at CU Boulder. I'm also in a cooperative institute between NOAA and the university called CERES, Cooperative Institute for Research in Environmental Sciences. My research background, I'm sort of a physical oceanographer / climate dynamicist. I've been in this position at CU for, I want to say 6 years or so. I got tenure a couple of years ago. Prior to working here, I worked at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution for about 6 years as a scientist, sort of moving my way up their version of the tenure track ladder. And prior to that, I did a postdoc at Columbia, and I'll end the timeline there. But yeah, I mean, my experience is just that I've served on a number of, probably a lot of search committees in a short period of time. I've also gotten jobs, so that's good. I managed to make it work at least once or twice. And I've helped my students and postdocs get, you know, to where they want to get. So I'm just going to leave it there. I'll stick to the introduction thing and leave as much time as possible for questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Katja?
Good morning, everyone. I'm sorry for the internet problems. My name is Katja Friedrich. I'm also in the Department of Atmospheric and Oceanic Science like Chris. I joined the department, I don't know, more than 10 years ago, 12, 13 years ago. Before that, I worked at the Swiss Weather Service in the radar research group. So my background is in radar meteorology, precipitation, severe weather. I did a postdoc in Boulder with NOAA, and I got my PhD in Munich with the Aerospace Institute. So I've been going back and forth between Europe and the US. I've been here now for 12, 13 years. I think through my career, I did a lot of flip-flopping, going here and there, and couldn't really figure out what I wanted to do. It was also a tough time for getting actually a job in science. Since then, I'm actually happy now where I am. As Chris, I mean, I've been in a lot of search committees. I have to say, things have really changed over the last 5 years, I mean, compared to when I actually applying for jobs. So that's actually interesting and good. And yeah, and we are also hoping to, I mean, we are working really actively in the department, finding jobs, not just for our graduate students, but also for our undergraduate students. And this has really changed over the last year. So I also leave it at that.
Thank you very much. So I'm opening up to a question from the audience, but I'll start with a simple question, I guess. I don't know, for you, maybe for the younger people, maybe it's hard. What can candidates do in preparation for an interview? What are some things that are expected of candidates to know or prepare on? Chris?
Daniela, could you just repeat the second half of your question there? I heard prepare for interview, but then something about campus.
Yes, sorry for my internet is not great. So no, what can candidates do in preparation for the interviews? What should they learn about? What should they be informed on?
I wouldn't mind throwing out one obvious one, I guess, if you don't mind. Know the department. Yeah. Know the department that you're going to. That's the easiest thing to spot from a not just the search committee, but the department who's hosting you and everyone who comes to your talk and has the exhausting one-on-one meetings with you all day long. You have to. It's a really good idea to do your homework on the department. You know, you don't have to memorize the entire CV of everybody you're about to meet with, but at least kind of have a sense of the people on your schedule, know what their research areas are, maybe have one sort of thing locked and ready to go in your mind if there's an awkward silence, you know, when you're meeting with somebody, where you can bring up something about their research and ask them a big picture question about their research, just so that, you know, you establish a little bit of a connection with each person that you meet with. And, you know, but part of knowing the department is also, don't walk in and say, you know, when somebody asks you what kind of courses would you envision teaching if you got a job here, you know, we can tell if you have done your homework on where is there a gap in our curriculum, rather than something that we already have like 3 versions of that course and clearly don't need another one. So I'll throw that one up there just to kick things off.
Yeah, thank you.
Go ahead, Jenny.
I was just going to say, I completely endorse everything that Chris said there. And that's obvious, but sometimes people just aren't ready for it. Something else is have some questions ready, right? So the first interview I ever did, you meet the department head, you meet the search committee, you meet many faculty individually, you meet students, and you very often meet the dean, right? So the first interview I did, I went into my meeting with the dean and he said, do you have any questions for me? Well, I must have sat there like a deer in headlights. I had no idea what to say. And he said, for example, you might ask me what my plans are for the department and how I intend the department to grow, or if I'm willing to put resources in. So I repeated that question to him and we had quite a nice conversation. And I used that in every other interview. And all of the other deans were so impressed that I had this incisive question. So I'm passing it along to all of you. But be ready with something like that for the dean, for the department head, for the search committee, and be ready to ask a question back to everyone you meet, right? And it may be something like, what's it like to live here? It may be something about when they got their courses started. I mean, what are you curious about? But people are going to say, do you have any questions for me? And if you're not ready, then again, you know, following what Chris said, you sound unprepared. You sound like you really don't know the department, that you're not as enthusiastic. You may be burning up inside to work in that department. But if you aren't ready, they're not going to know that.
Yeah, one last thing just to add is also be authentic, because the thing is, because we know your career from the paper, we got reference letters, and we know your career back and forth, but we don't know you as a person. And that's why most of the time we want to interview people, because we want to talk to you, not just about your research, but also what kind of person are you? So be authentic, and you don't have to act or something, because but just try to connect with the department. But also, this is also an interview that you do with the department. So say, okay, this is my vision, this is what I want. And you can also walk away and say, you know, I don't really want to be in this department. So that goes back to the question, but also be authentic. These are my goals. This is what I want to achieve, and place it out there. You will see that a lot of these meetings and conversations, yes, you talk about some scientific things, you talk about how is it living in the town, but a lot of things will be just private things. It's like, what do you like to do? And you're talking about whatever, a vacation, or you're talking about going to a conference. It will not really hardcore. It's not like an exam where you will be tested on the 3-dimensional vorticity equation. It's more like really brainstorming, or maybe you come up with, I mean, people were talking about some topic or an experiment, and then you contribute to this. So really the most important thing, and this is really not what you can prepare for, but being authentic and just showing your personality.
Thank you, everyone. We have some follow-up questions in the chat from Josh. So he was asking Katya if she can expand a little bit on the hiring, how the hiring process has changed the last 5 years.
So there are two things. I mean, the job market has changed, but also the hiring process has changed, because we're putting a lot more emphasis on this, you as your personality and your surrounding. I remember like maybe the first hiring, like 10 years ago, you would look at your CV and your age index and how many publications, where are they, da, 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 da. Now we're looking also more about you as a person. What is your surrounding? Is this a spousal hire? Is this a two-body problem? How can we integrate? Do you have kids? How can we integrate? So this is actually more on a personal level. And that's why I think this being authentic is so much more important. How do you come across? How do you interact with students? How do you interact with your colleagues? I think this emphasis of like really building a team, I think has changed over the last 10 years, and we are putting much, much more emphasis on like these things like mental health, that you're really also happy in the department that you're choosing.
Yeah. May I follow on from that? I think what Katya said is all true. Strictly in the interview process, they're not allowed to ask you anything about your personal life, right? So they can't say, are you married? Do you have kids? You may volunteer that or you may not, and that's completely up to you. So that's one thing. The other thing is I agree absolutely that the people are trying to understand how you'll fit into the department. But I also agree with the being authentic. If you're an introvert, that's okay. You don't have to be the all singing, all dancing, super whatever. Be yourself, right? And if that's an introvert, that's an introvert. If that's a raving extrovert, maybe tone it down a little bit, but still be yourself. So,
thank you.
No, yeah, no, I was already writing in the chat what Jenny was going to say about the fact that we can't ask anything about that. But I feel like maybe we should address it anyways, because training isn't always digested, and people on a search committee might unknowingly, or not on the search committee, but one of your one-on-one meetings, say it's just flowing and very natural, and somebody means well. Maybe they have kids and they just are excited to tell you about the various childcare options or something like that. So they might mean well, and they might slip, and somebody might accidentally ask you directly, or sort of directly, if you have kids, or if you are if you have a spouse who's going to be looking for a job in the area. I would just be prepared with how you're going to handle that. That's going to be different for every person, but I would bet that this happens on every interview, unless the training is like really good for the search committee and everyone in the department. So my recommendation would be to be prepared with how you're going to tactfully handle that. You don't want to, especially if you can tell someone just meant well with it, and you really want the job, and it's not that offensive to you that it was asked, just have like a good tactful way to address that, or not answer it if you don't want to answer it, without like blowing up the whole thing if you don't want to go that way, so just be prepared, because it happens, unfortunately.
Yeah, if you don't want to answer it, ask another question. So you're asked about kids, you don't want to answer that. Well, ask about outdoor activities, or cultural, like talk about the personal bit, but you don't have to talk about that. But you don't probably want to say, I don't want to answer that. You may.
I didn't really mean that. Actually, you're right. You might not get a direct answer, but I think what I'm saying now is like there are more of these meetings where you talk about not science, and
yes,
come up. You don't have to answer. Everyone will ask you, what's your marital status? How many kids? That is absolutely correct. But we are talking, I think, more and more about like, okay, outdoor activities and things like that. And so be prepared. And again, you don't need to, open up and say whatever your life status is, but be prepared that these conversations come. And because again, we as a department want to know you as a person and not just your scientific career. And another interesting questions here in the chat is as when you have 2 or 3, 4, 5 final candidates, what does the search committee look for? And again, this comes back to the meeting. The other thing that I want to mention is you will see in the search committee really has a hard time because there are so many good candidates that would fit. And it's really difficult really to sort through. You will also see, but oftentimes the department has an idea who they want to hire. This starts with like seniority, whether they want to hire someone really at an entrance level or mid-career level, because you will see there are a lot of people will apply for an assistant professor position that are mid-career. And then, you can't really compete with them. And there's a totally different problem that then actually lands on the search committee. But again, mid-career people might not actually land the job because the department has a different idea, because either they can only hire at the assistant professor level. Also, again, it comes back to what the idea is that the department has. For instance, for years, we've been trying to reach out to the weather service. So we had just recently like a synoptic meteorology position opening. And so, you can't imagine, of course, synoptic meteorology, you get so many applications, but we were really looking for this link between synoptic meteorology and the weather service, even though we had so many really competent candidates. So sometimes it's this, the department wants to really meet a need that they have in their teaching curriculum. So even if you are qualified and you have a lot of like good papers and reference in this, there's often the department looks for very specific things. So if you're turned down, it doesn't mean that you are not really a top candidate, but you're really not fulfilling what the department need is. And that's also something that you can figure out during these interviews, that you listen carefully, like what are the needs? Because oftentimes they are in the job description and you can contact the person who puts out the application, but we will never really tell you, because again, we also want to keep it broad because we want to get a lot of applicants and then maybe do change our needs because we have this really capable applicant that we then would hire.
Yeah, definitely don't take it personally in that you're not good enough if you don't get the offer. You can think about what you learned from the interview. One quick thing is you are interviewing them as well as they are interviewing you. I went to 2 universities and I decided I couldn't work there for different reasons. And so even if I'd got the job offer for those, I decided I wasn't going to take it. And so maybe that was a different time, I don't know, but you are interviewing them and trying to understand how you'll fit in there. I saw a question come by about interdisciplinarity. When you go to an interview, you want to have a vision of what you want to do. You want to understand how you can fit into the department, but you also want to be able to talk about where you're going intellectually, right? So what's your vision? And if your vision is interdisciplinary, and I, as you can tell, I'm completely invested that I think that that's where things are going, then talk about it. Talk about, you'll often get asked, well, what kind of collaborations might you set up if you come here? And you might say, well, in the geosciences department, there's this oceanographer that I'd love to collaborate with, or in statistics, or in, sociology. I mean, whatever you're thinking about, be ready to say, this is the direction I see myself going, and this is how that would fit in broadly to the department or the university, making connections where they make sense. So that's something else to think of.
Thank you, Jenny. Chris, do you have anything to add to what the department can do or does when I have to choose between more candidates, or anything about doing interdisciplinary and how to present your interdisciplinary vision, even if it's not necessarily the department is more focused, I guess?
I mean, I think I'm drawing back to my own days of interviewing, but my little trick was, don't tell Katja this was my trick. This worked well when I interviewed at Hui and when I interviewed at CU, but I made an effort to really try to come up with some way I could work with some of those people, in a sincere way, not some kind of, oh, let's submit a proposal 1 week after I start, some kind of, no, not like that, but just find ways where our research overlaps and kind of in an honest way, talk about how maybe in the long run we could see, training a student together that could be sort of cross these interdisciplinary lines together. That worked really well at Hui. Pretty sure it's why I got the job. I almost started working on a project with somebody at night in between the interview days. So, but I think if you can make the people you meet feel like, even if your discipline is different than theirs, that you could bring something to their research program as well, and it could be a mutual benefit, this collaboration, and it can work out. A lot of times in departments, people don't work together. Like, I don't know, Katja, in our department, we've got about 20 faculty, and we're not all working together, but there are occasions when different faculty members in the same department do actually overlap and co-author a paper together. And that's been some of the most fun research efforts that I've been a part of. So if you can make people feel like that could happen, if they hire you, they might be that much more excited to champion your case when it comes to that final department vote meeting where the search committee presents the final 1 or 2, and the department discusses and has the real moment where they decide. That's when that could really pay off.
Yeah, and just to add to Chris, I think we want to see your ideas. We want to see that you're creative. So again, this goes back to these lunch discussions where you talk about something that might be not your area, or maybe even not even work related. But again, we want to see, oh, you have an active mind and you have ideas and want to bring something to the department. I think that's really important. Another thing that actually I want to add on, because Valerie made this comment, she said that in the chat that there's a bias about men and women and parents and kids and something like and all this. And you're absolutely right. what I would suggest is, again, look at the department and try to find your alliances or people who you could connect with. So every interview I have with a candidate, I tell them about my 2 kids. I'm telling them about what is the academic life if you have 2 kids and blah, blah, blah. So whether you want to hear it or not, because again, I'm throwing this out to you and maybe you catch on or you don't. But again, find your alliances and see, okay, are there people who might be in a similar situation, and then open up to them. Again, this is another change that has happened over the 10 years because there are much more younger faculty coming in with diverse background. In our department, we have probably almost 50% women, and we have a lot of young families. So this is a big issue that you can discuss with almost anyone. Again, this two-body problem that you have a spouse that is in the same area and needs to have a job as well. This comes up as well. So again, find people that you think would be on your side and discuss it with them and ask questions like, how is it? And is the department supportive of that? And again, you don't need to reveal your situation or your life plan, but you can ask questions. Again, if you have a more senior researcher who might not have kids, I mean, you might not want to pose the question, but again, look at the faculty and find people who might be in a similar situation that you are.
Thank you, Katja, for the insight.
If you don't want to,
yeah.
Oh, sorry. I agree with everything Katja just said, but also to underscore something I think she did say or imply is that you don't have to at all. And those questions can come up once you have an offer, and they can't take that off. They're not going to take that offer back once you start asking those questions. So the safest thing to do, if you're already there interviewing, you've already gotten on the plane, you're already devoting a few days to it. So go for it. And then if you want to hold on to the trickier things, the trickier issues for once you get an offer, that doesn't hurt you at all, you know?
And yeah, I agree. And once they've made the offer, they're more committed to you. The thing is then negotiate as hard as you can at that point. If you do have a spousal hire, don't think, oh, we'll figure it out once I get there. Because once you get there, you're invested, right? Your next career step has been made. You need to negotiate up front. You know, and I mean, it's actually a lot easier if you're not in exactly the same field, because the deans talk to each other and they trade off and they help. You know, so I'm working with 2 deans, 2 different colleges right now because, you know, spouses are coming in who understand computation and are willing to take a different kind of career path. But negotiate hard in the negotiating process for that.
And I just want to add something, yeah, and also mention it early on. Again, when you're interviewing and you talk to the department chair or the dean, just mention that. Because, I mean, from my experience, it has never been, oh, if we put this person on first position, we have to hire 2 versus, oh, let's put the other person on the as a first candidate, because we just have to hire 1. I've never seen that. But what is important that when you saw that early on, the deans and the chairs, they can actually get the ball rolling. Again, once you have the offer, it is often too late because you want to actually have 2 offers at the same time, or maybe more or less at the same time. So mention that early. Don't phrase it in a way, this is a no-go decision, but say this is something that needs to be that you are considering, or that moving to a different place. So mention that at least early.
Yeah, thank you. I want to ask you how the interviewing process has changed during the pandemic situation. I know that prior to this, there was campus visits, different interviews. Are they all now just online Zoom meetings, or how are they going on?
Yeah, I got out of one this morning, just full on. So we normally have a 2 to 3 day interview process for any job. And they're just 2 or 3 days for that poor person sitting in front of Zoom screens. So you have to be able to make that personal connection through a computer, right? So when you're on campus, you wander between appointments and people, someone usually escorts you so you can chat. You can ask the kinds of questions Katya's talking about indirectly. You know, you may have an administrative assistant you can kind of ask offline as you're walking between meetings and things that are a bit easier to finesse. But on Zoom, you just have to do your best in this setting. And I've had for the last year, every interview's been on Zoom only.
How would you improve? How can the candidates get more from the interview in this virtual environment?
Well, I mean, I think you just have to have everything we've talked about the interview process still has to happen, right? You still have to communicate everything about yourself. I saw a question come by about, can you apply for a job if you're not quite the person they say they're looking for? And that may be even more of a challenge in the Zoom setting. You know, in the face-to-face, you can have side conversations and you can kind of bring things up in the side, but yeah, I mean, there's nothing to be done. At least everyone's on the same footing, right? Committees will, if one person could interview in person, they will still have that person on Zoom to keep it even.
Okay.
I want to answer a question that Sarah actually posed, which I think is interesting. She said, are there any questions you feel are valuable but are rarely asked for early career interviews? I think that's a good question. I mean, an advice that I would give for interviews is, again, ask, what is the vision for the department? I think a lot of interviews don't really want to ask that question because maybe it's just too much, I mean, too forward. But just try to phrase it in a nice way, that you ask like the chair and even senior faculty, okay, what is your plan for teaching? What's your plan for supporting new faculty? Because this goes back to you are also interviewing them. Again, you need to be careful that it's not too demanding or that doesn't sound too demanding, but that's something that I feel especially early career, are too shy to ask those questions. But again, it shows us that you are also involved, that you have a vision, that you want to stay in the department. That's the other thing that sometimes departments look, if you make the offer, are you really coming? And again, this goes back to, or you might interview at 10 other places, or you might, you're just applied here because you want to use that to maybe get a better position at your institute. So we never know that. So that's why we are trying to figure this out. How likely is it that you come? And again, when you ask more questions that how you can get involved in the department, what is the idea of the department? I think this is maybe a question that I don't see asked really in depth a lot from early career interviews.
Yeah, I would second what Katja said. I think, you have to realize that when you're in a department, most of the vast majority of your interactions with your fellow faculty members have nothing to do with science. And so it is about vision and logistics and the philosophy. Where are we going? Right, Katja? I mean, we don't really, our faculty meetings are not really about science. And when we serve on committees within the department, so we want to asking those kinds of questions that demonstrate big picture thinking and vision. I think it's just a good demonstration that you're going to be a good colleague and you're going to be contributing to the business of the department and the faculty's role in the university. There's some big things on the table and on the horizon, like academic freedom and who controls the curriculum and all sorts of things that are changes and or threats, depending on how you look at it in higher education. And we need faculty who will be there to deliberate and work together and ultimately fight together. Anything that we are that's important to us as a faculty. So even if those questions are just kind of theater, have some of them, have some of those questions, because it really is a good demonstration that you're going to be right there with us, shoulder to shoulder.
Yeah, and wherever you are now, reach back to your advisor or around the people you're meeting now and ask them, what do they see as the opportunities or threats? And be willing to bring that up, that you understand this, and maybe you wonder what the department's doing about it. Another thing is, I always think of a department, and maybe this is too mercenary, but essentially as an intellectual chamber of commerce, right? Because each faculty member has their own research program and largely develops the resources to make that run. But we all have to make the pedagogical mission of the department work, right? So we all have to make sure that the students have the best quality education and experience and so on. And then we all do different kinds of service that we can bring those perspectives into the department. So we have this nexus around the education mission. Sometimes we overlap in the research, but largely not. But we support each other's career development. So there's this very much independent and then community interplay when you're in a department. And part of, I'm just kind of responding to bits and pieces that are coming by. How much should you, like the vision you should be able to communicate on your research? I think it's the same as the vision you want to be able to communicate thinking about the overall enterprise. Have an elevator speech. Right? In 2 minutes, why is your research important? Right? Just really quick, so that you can say when you go into, you're going to have, 40 half-hour meetings, something like that. Each one, the person wasn't in the previous meeting you were in, so they don't know you're saying the same thing over and over again. And that elevator speech is probably the most important thing you can say, usually at the beginning of each of those meetings. Why should you care about what I'm doing? Why is my research important? 2 minutes.
Yeah, actually, I want to answer Jonathan's question about the pandemic. But before that, actually, one thing that came to my mind, what also has changed over the last 10 years is, I think that candidates and us ourselves, that we talk more about our vulnerability and how we failed. I remember like 10 years ago when I was for an interview, I mean, you would never talk about your failure and where you did not succeed. And I think this is becoming a little bit more tolerable. That's actually what candidates do, and what also faculty member or interviewers saying that, I mean, this is where I was not successful, but somehow I turned it around and maybe I changed my research area or something like that, that we openly talk about this now. And I don't think this was like 10 years ago, that you would go for an interview and you would try not to reveal anything where you failed, and you would just present everything where you succeeded. And this has changed. One thing Jonathan is pointing out is like, okay, what's the impact of the pandemic? And I have to say, we are all in the same boat, more or less. I mean, we are all affected by the pandemic. So what we do, for instance, at CU now, when people go up for tenure or promotion, you put in a COVID statement saying, how did COVID impact you? And again, this is not so much that a place where you can whine and complain. This is more like really state the fact, saying, okay, because of COVID, I couldn't go, the conferences were all canceled over online, or this experiment was canceled. I could not gather the data, and that was part of my thesis, and therefore I could not publish, or everything was delayed. I had to work from home with a slow internet. That's why I could just state the fact. Don't make it like you sound that you're complaining, but state the fact. I had a really slow internet. Everything was slow. I had 2 screaming kids that I had to homeschool. I could only work half the day. So these kind of things, and again, be honest, because again, think about this, we're all in the same space, more or less. Most of us actually were really badly impacted. Or you can also just say, I mean, this people around me got sick, or I got sick, or I had to take care of someone who's sick. Again, you don't really, it's up to you how much personal information you want to reveal. but maybe add a COVID statement. If COVID impacted you, then add a COVID statement to your, I don't know where you put it, your letter, or your CV or something. And again, talk openly about that, because if the other side doesn't know, then this is really difficult to react. And again, this is something also not just for COVID, but this goes back to failures. Again, talk openly about this. Because again, we see gaps in the CV, and then sometimes, and often we talk about this, like, what did this guy do between here and there? You know, and if there are gaps, this is something that you don't really want to have it, but you could say, you know, I took a gap, and then again, try to phrase it nicely. You can say, okay, I had to take a gap year because I was really stuck somewhere and I didn't know what to do, and that's why I took a gap year, and then I came back, and now I know what you want to do. And this goes back to this, like, what has changed over the 10 years, because now we openly talk about this. So if there are any gaps or anything that you think in your CV could look weird, address it in a very honest way.
Yeah.
Thank you, Katya. Any other insights for what departments are doing to address the effect of the pandemic on the candidates?
I would just, I want to double what Katya said about being able to address gaps, because as soon as you see a gap in someone's resume, the questions arise. So being able to say what that gap was about, even if it's something like, I felt I had to leave this place and I needed to rethink my career, great, right? But be able to say, and I'll hand back to Chris, I think I stepped on it.
No, it's okay. I was going to say, I think this is so okay to do that departments like ours, and I'm sure other departments around the country are doing the same thing, but we're forming little subcommittees to even take a look at we know these impacts are not just last year, you know, especially for us faculty, we're probably going to have these impacts not even really rear their head until next year, given how long it takes a paper to go through the process and get published. I mean, you might look like you had a great 2020, but you know, that's because you really had a great 2019, you know. So we're looking at our own bylaws, and we're looking at our own policies of standards for tenure and promotion, and how to adjust or accommodate these issues. So this is part of a big landscape of academia adjusting and accommodating for COVID. And so you should really feel free to do everything Jenny and Katya just said, that it's not going to come out of the blue or seem like you're making up excuses. We all are doing the same thing.
One thing that has, I think, been positive is the funding agencies are very aware of the issues that we've just been talking about. And they're also aware that, you know, in people who are in labs or field work could legitimately have not been able to get into the lab or out in the field this year. And that affects what you can deliver on your grant. And your grant is actually with the university. NSF funds the university, and you're nominated to carry out that contract. So the universities are freaked out about not delivering. But NSF got that, right? And they've also made a decision that they don't want to lose a generation of scientists, right? This gap in your career, this issue that's going to make your resume look, you know, maybe 21 and 22, your resume is not so hot, right? But NSF understand that, and I'll make a blanket statement, any university you want to go to understands that, right? Because if they're not thinking about their faculty and students now, when would they? So I think that it is going to be a challenge. Your resume may take a hit. If you're very lucky, it may take a small one. But the funding agencies are aware of it, and the universities that I think you would want to consider are aware of it.
Thank you. Chris, do you have anything to add?
Not really. I have a small topic. If we, it's something that I get asked a lot by people applying for jobs who are grad students and postdocs. And why don't I just throw the topic out there, and then I won't dive into it. But if that's where people actually want to go, we can. And it's how to address the fact that you usually have little to no teaching experience coming into and this is part of the application thing too, but once you actually have an interview, might be a good idea to talk about strategies for, demonstrating and discussing your teaching potential and skills that may not have much to back up on this, may not have a lot of backup on the CV. So I'll throw that out there, but we can go in any direction people want. It's an option.
We can expand on this if you want, or anyone else from the panel wants to discuss.
I think I want to actually start that, because I think this is a really good one, Chris. But I think once you made it to an interview, I think we think that you can teach. So that's the first thing. So then it's really important. Two things are important: that you really give a good, engaging talk, where because that is basically where you show you can teach. So again, remember, you are the expert in the field, but there's so many faculty members, and they might be or think they're smart, but they're not expert in the field. So teach them something. So make your seminar as like a teachable experience for everyone, because then they say, oh, she's a great, or he or she is a great teacher. The second thing is connect with the students. Okay, so for instance, in our department, the students have a voice. If the students say, oh, I mean, this was really, the lunch we had with this candidate was really weird. I mean, he or she made comments and statements. This is really important. Listen to what the students have to say. Listen how the students feel, and then interact with them. And this is really important, because if our students would say, oh, if all of the students that went for lunch with the candidate would say, we have a really bad feeling and it was not very good lunch, we listen to our students, and we would usually not put the candidate on the first position, even if the faculty anonymously thinks that this is a good candidate.
Thank you.
Yeah,
so
thanks a lot, Katja. That was everything
okay.
I was going to say. No.
So then the thing is gaining teaching experience, because I'm also the associate chair for the department, and so I'm overseeing all the teaching. So there are several things that you can do. Again, try to maybe co-teach, maybe like for instance, in our department, we are hiring lecturers. So maybe you can be a lecturer if you really want to become a professor, and that's something that you think about this. Maybe you can, for one semester, teach a course. It's not very rewarding financially, but it is good for your CV. And think about whether you can do a summer session or have a seminar or something that where you can fill in the teaching gap.
Yeah, and I want to follow up on something Katja did say. I have seen some of these interview seminars where it was almost awkward, but it was just perfect. Where in the middle of this research seminar, the candidate had clearly decided there's this one slide or this one topic where they're gonna kind of step out of research presentation mode and teach a fundamental concept. And I've seen this, and it just works great. I'm like, I know what you're doing. You're trying to show me you're auditioning for teaching right now, because we don't usually you don't come and give a lecture, to students. So if you're gonna audition that you have good teaching chops, you have to do it in that research seminar. And like I said, it's just been beautiful when a candidate has kind of decided this is going to be a topic, I'm going to show you that I can teach you how to do it. And sure, many people in the room know that, but they might be impressed that they might walk away thinking, wow, I might try to teach that concept in that way. Just show that you care about teaching technique and pedagogy, and taking a very complex subject and presenting it to undergraduates. Teach one of your slides to undergraduates, and if people are so smart they already know it, they'll understand what you're doing, and they'll probably be impressed that you've gone ahead and made a deliberate effort to audition that you can teach. And also Katja's point about when you have those lunches with students, again, you're auditioning, and you might have an opportunity to at one of those lunches say, hey, have you heard of Empower, mentoring physical oceanography for women? You should look into that, or do a little bit of mentoring right then and there, so that the students, when they go back and report to the faculty, they might, you're not trying to trick them, but they'll say, look, this candidate even sort of helped me out a little bit, whether they get the job or not. I appreciate that conversation I had with them. So my message is that you're auditioning, and don't be afraid to kind of be deliberate about it.
And just to follow up, your teaching statement is not really pure teaching, it's more mentoring, teaching and mentoring. So if you mentor student, even if you did like outreach to schools, I mean, this can be considered teaching. Don't just think about classroom teaching, but think broadly where you taught a community, or you taught kids, or you were mentoring people. All this can go into a teaching experience. And then it's also not wrong if you don't really have a lot of teaching experience, just state your philosophy. This is how I would do this. This is how I see teaching, and this is my philosophy. And you can fill a teaching statement with that.
Yeah, I think that that's important. And more generally, thinking about things you've done that demonstrate personal characteristics. So again, looking at students, I have the ability to take on a major project and follow through to a fantastic conclusion. And you have something, you know, your thesis or something. You know, I also run marathons, right? And I've had to have that kind of a thing. You may just bring that up in a face-to-face. I saw a couple of quick things. Quantity versus quality of publications, quality, but don't have one per year, right? There's kind of a balance there, but we care about the intellectual. And if you're pushing 20 papers out into blogs and SPOGS journal, no one's going to care. On the non-native English speaker, you have to be able to be understood. People aren't wanting you to be an Oxford Don. So I think that being understood is something critical there. And the one last thing is be willing to talk about diversity, how you would support increasing diversity in the community, in the department. If you've done something, what you've done, it's becoming increasingly just a standard thing we're looking for in interviewing candidates, is how do you either personally, experiences you've had, things you would propose. That's becoming important. You don't have to be someone from a particular underrepresented group. You just have to be able to say how you would contribute to the mission.
Thank you, Jenny. Do you, Chris and Katya, have any other comments on publications, quantity?
The publication, I think, is, if it's not, because we have the same discussion when people go up for tenure and reappointment, if you are, for instance, in a field where things do not get published a lot, or where it's a really narrow field, and you think that the faculty will not understand that, again, explain that. Again, in our department, it's because we have a lot of faculty who do observational work. Yes, it takes a long time to get the papers out because you need to do the experiment first, you need to analyze the data, But if you feel that the opposite party doesn't understand that, then you can somewhere put this in. Non-native English speaker. I mean, I interviewed when I came from Germany. Again, English was my second language. Apparently, I made it. I think the university is actually a good working place because we are looking for also international diversity. So I think this is not a problem. It comes back to the teaching. Can you teach a course and do the students understand what you're saying? I've been here for now 15 years. I mean, students still complain and they say they can't understand what I'm saying in my FCQ. So you have to get over that. The department usually has your back, but you will get these comments, and you have to grow thick skin about this. And then the last thing that I wanted to say, the diversity statement. Okay, I think this was a good point, Jenny, because even if it's not, some schools now require it, that you make a diversity statement, but I think this is like the COVID statement. If they're not asking for it, just do it. Because I think this shows that you are really on top of what's going on. And again, that you have a philosophy. That's important.
Thank you for those insights. Chris, do you want to add something?
You can tell when I unmute, can't you?
Yeah,
I was just going to say, like, Katja's point is really good, that different fields or sub-disciplines within a field have pretty different expectations for quantity of output and how long it takes to develop a project and get the paper out. And I feel like we we either do understand that already or we don't mind the reminder, you know. So like Katja said, try to make that kind of clear, especially if you're in you know, a field where you obviously you're not going to explain why you have so many papers. So we're talking about fields where you have fewer. And I think like if it takes you know, getting on a ship and going out into the middle of the Pacific Ocean and drilling a coral and, you know, getting that back into a lab, and then finally you have some data and it's crap and you have to go back and do it again, you know, make sure they understand that. But usually we do, and it's a fair point to make.
I just want to add one note thing. So if you're in a field, I think in math, what they do, they actually sort the authors by in alphabetical order. So if something like this, because again, we also want to see that you have a first author publication. So if something like that is outside of the field that you're applying to, just make that clear, because we might not know that and wondering why your name with a Z always ends up at the end of the publication. And this is the other thing, again, we want to also see first author application. So again, when the university hires someone, they want to see that you can be successful, which means you can mentor students, you can get research money, you can publish. Okay, so, and again, we're also not just looking at one thing. Usually we have various measures that we put together for an applicant to come up in whatever the first 4 or 5 candidates. So, so it's not just one thing. If you're weak in one thing, it doesn't really matter. You could be strong in a different one. So, and that might be also something that if you want to address. And as Chris says, if your publications are on the lower end, that might be something you want to address. Just read your CV, and this goes back to these gaps. Like when we read your CV, what do you think would come up? Like if you realize that a gap in your CV comes up, then it will probably come up. If you think, okay, they might be actually concerned about the number of publications that I have or the number of first author publication, yes, then that probably will come up. So it's always good to address that and make a statement about this. And again, try to phrase it in a good sense. Another thing that actually came to my mind, as Jenny said, that she's running marathons. Yeah, again, we are all human beings and we are looking through 100 applications. So if I see something interesting in an application, that really sticks with me. And then when we have a discussion, then we have, okay, what about the marathon runner? Or what about this and this person? And this is also something that you can do in your letter, highlight something where you're really good at, even though it's not really related to the job that you're applying, but that sticks because you want people to remember your file. But it's difficult if you have a lot of really good researchers with, I mean, a good publication list, then it's really difficult to stand out. But if you have something that could stand out in a different area, that I think is pretty helpful.
Thank you. You are muted, Jenny.
Thinking about the first author, really what we're trying to understand is, especially coming in a junior position, is are you an independent thinker, right? If you're sort of first author and your advisor's always second or your advisor's first, have you unhooked the apron strings? Are you thinking independently? Even if you're working with your advisor all the time, are you the one driving it now? You know, when my students come in, I'm driving the research. I have the funding, I'm driving the research. By the time they leave, I expect them to be telling me why I'm wrong, right? Because they should be the expert at that point. And I should be, you know, pretty good, but they should be able to take it the next step. And then they're launched and they go to that next point in their career and they're an independent thinker. They may work with me or not work with me at that point, who knows? But they should be showing that they're an independent thinker.
Thank you. We have a question from Val. How do you view postdoc participation proposals? And even if they're not PI or they are somewhere very far down the list?
Yeah, this is pretty easy actually. If you are well, at CU, I know my postdocs submit proposals as PI, but I think it does vary by university. But if you are effectively the lead PI in a proposal, and some senior PI or your postdoc advisor just has to be listed as the PI for programmatic reasons, have a conversation with them so that when they write the letter of recommendation, they clearly state, that's something they can have a whole paragraph about how you led that proposal. Yeah, my name is on the top of it, but this is their proposal. And I see that in letters of recommendation all the time. It just has to be addressed in that in some other way where it's made clear, because yeah, I guess I didn't realize that postdocs couldn't be PIs at some institutions. But
so on that, be ready, like this whole first author and so on is, what is your contribution? So be ready to talk about your contribution. If you were the author of that proposal but couldn't be, that's an obvious one. But what were your contributions? If it's a 3-author paper, what was your part of that? Oh, bother. The other thing just went out of my head. When you're writing an application letter, when you've asked people to be your references, you could say to them, I ask, what are the things you want me to highlight in that letter? I write the letter. You don't know what I ultimately wrote. But if you have a research finding you just think is like earth-shattering, make sure that I know that so that I can put that in the letter. If you want me to highlight a particular aspect of your research or of your personality, or to say something about, I don't have that teaching, but here is evidence that the advisor has seen of ways of promising aspects for you to be a teacher. What is it? Just make sure that that's in there. And they will usually be very grateful for you just giving them, because you're asking different referees to give you a reference for different reasons. Tell them what the reason is that you've asked them.
Yeah, and you can even make a statement in the CV if you are only the senior personnel on a proposal, but you actually did a lot. You can make a note in your CV saying NCAR did not allow that or something like that. I think this is but again, I think being part of a proposal writing process might be just more a learning curve that you then actually can say, in an interview, I have never wrote a proposal, but I participate in that and I see what the process is. Again, at the end, this is really not a game changer. As I said, when I applied for the job, I came from Europe, which has a different funding situation. I've never wrote a proposal and they still hired me. So again, it's more this, is he or she capable of doing that? And that also goes back to the second language. Jesus, I had a hard time writing my first proposal. And I don't know how many people, co-read it, because I was so afraid of making all these mistakes and sounding like really a foreigner writing a proposal. So that might be something that you have to think about this. Again, another thing that when you submit your application, make sure that there are no spelling mistakes, that there are no grammar mistakes and things like that, especially for an academic unit. Professors are very, very picky about these things and they pick it up, and this is a negative thing. So have people read, or other people read your application and make sure that everything is really solid.
Yeah. I had the same thing coming from Australia. I'd never had to write a proposal, and I got here and away you go. I see someone asking, do you need a long publication list to apply for a faculty job? And apply, right? Even if you get an interview and you don't get the job, you've still had practice interviewing and understanding the situation and what you're going to do. If your research is good and you just don't have the papers, if they bring you in for an interview, they are understanding that and they're looking for someone to bring along. So, how are you going to decide how many papers is enough if you're waiting to publish?
Yeah, I second that completely. It brought back bad memories from my own life, but I applied for a job, got an interview. It went so well. I was like, I knew from the inside that it was down to 2 candidates, and I knew who the other candidate was. I had a mole on the inside, and the other candidate was like fresh out of their PhD, had like 1 paper and 2 in prep, and they got the job. But sometimes they made the right decision. That person's way better than me now. But the sometimes a department knows or has a feeling for somebody, and they let them make that decision. Don't count yourself out. Let them see if they see that in you, the same thing that you believe about yourself, even if one aspect is a little bit slower to develop, like the number of publications.
And going back to what Katya said, be able to explain it, but don't apologize for it. Don't go in with a sense that I'm not good enough because I don't have the papers. Be able to explain if you are relying on field program data, or you just developed this great new computer model and you're, explain it and go on with the interview as if you are the absolutely top candidate. I had an experience that I'd taken on board so late in my career. When you are in a meeting that's important, have in your head that you're hosting this person. So it's your job to make them feel comfortable rather than waiting for them to judge you, right? Don't be sitting there feeling like you're being judged. Be sitting there trying to help make a situation very comfortable. Because then you're taking control of the situation in a positive way.
Yeah, I mean, one
Thank
thing
you.
that also I think has changed over the last 10 years is that these academic units are also actually hiring more people from industry, or not necessarily with an academic background. And I think this was, for instance, one reason why I was hired, because I worked at the Weather Service, and our department at that time really wanted to have a closer relationship. Or their teaching idea was going also covering the weather forecasting part. So again, if you are weak in one area, try to elevate, like, what is your strength? Maybe you don't have enough in a lot of papers, but maybe you have this industry connection. Maybe you've worked in industry for many years, because again, at the end of the day, we need to teach our students so they can get a job. And most of the jobs might not be in academia. So you can actually leverage that and say, I have both experience. I've worked in industry for many years, and I have an academic career. So again, highlight your strength. But again, one thing is, we are hiring more people from industry because we want to have this industry connection.
Thank you. We are approaching the end of this discussion. So if you have any final comments or recommendation for the participants, and what do you think is most important during the interview?
The final comment that I would throw out there is, it's kind of like when you're writing a paper or a proposal, some of those things you've already done. You have to remember that ultimately this person's going to decide they like the file or they don't, or the paper or the proposal or your case. And especially if it's a member of the search committee, keep in mind that in a week or 2 or 3, there's going to be a meeting, and they need to sell. If they've decided you're their favorite, they have to sell that to the rest of the department. And then it kind of becomes their game to win, and give them all of the ammunition possible, all of the things, like make it really clear, kind of like when you write a proposal, use bold on like the best parts that you want them to remember, and go back and use that to sell to the panel. So remember that you're also kind of equipping that person with what you think is like the best selling points about you, so that they can sell you behind closed doors to the rest of the faculty, and argue that you should be the #1 candidate.
Yeah, I think it starts when you apply. So look at the advertisement and address every point, everything that's asked for, address it in your letter. And if someone said you're not quite in the field they're advertising for, although often the advertisements are broad, say why you're a good fit anyway. Don't try and turn a cloud physicist into a dynamicist, right? But say why you're a fit that they want to consider regardless. And then when you're and in the letter and in the interview, what's different about you? Like Chris was saying, to give them something to sell, give them something that makes you stand out, right? So, the marathon runner is one, or, you just develop this fantastic new method and the paper's being written, but you can talk to them about it. You can be ready to show them things and get them excited. Like, this is the person who's on the cutting edge of a new method for cloud microphysical parameterization, whatever it is. Yeah, so that's it. You're selling yourself, but you're also interviewing them. I think that's still important. You need to make sure that when you get there, you're going to thrive. You're not going to limp along, because that's the next step in your career that's more challenging.
Okay, I just want to answer Anna's question, because she said, should you contact the department head ahead of time? I think this is a good idea. Who I would contact is not the department head. I would contact the head of the search committee, because they are in charge of that. And if you have a question, again, you can ask. Maybe you can even ask for a telephone conversation or Zoom meeting, and then maybe you get a little bit like the idea of like what they are searching for. Okay, so just, I mean, I totally agree with Chris and Jenny about what they said. I mean, again, be yourself. Once you go for an interview, you've already done most of the legwork. So just be yourself, be relaxed, be polite, and listen. I think this is an important one. Listen what other people say and react to that. But be yourself and just be relaxed. And just try to enjoy it. And again, this is also a learning process, because you learn a lot from these interviews for your next interview.
Thank you very much. So
yeah, and be polite to the, yes, that's actually the staff. I think Chris didn't really be nice to the administrative staff. Yes, they also have a vote.
Yeah, we listen to our staff, you know, for sure. We want to know that they're going to contribute to a healthy, happy department culture, and not, we don't accidentally let something that could, you know, sort of turn toxic. You never know. And people might, if they act differently to the administrative staff than the people that they think they have to sell themselves to, that's a red flag. So we do ask our staff what they think.
Yep.
I want to thank all the panelists again for their insights and for answering our questions. And I want to thank the participants for asking questions and for being here. So that's about it. Thank you very much. And I hope you have a lovely rest of the day.
Thank you. Good luck, everyone.
Yes, thank you so much.
Bye.
That was really excellent.
Nice meeting you, Jenny. I've never met you before. I don't think you. Bye-bye.
Bye.